Landon Graves was already running late when he saw the guy grab her arm. He was cutting through the back alley behind the coffee shop, trying to avoid the crowd on Fifth, when the sharp sound of a woman's voice stopped him cold. "Let go of me," she snapped, her voice tight, not trembling but angry. Landon turned. A man in a cheap button-up had his hand clenched around a woman's wrist. She looked about mid-20s with dark waves of hair falling over her shoulders, her sharp jaw clenched. The guy was leaning in too close, saying something low and ugly. Landon didn't hesitate. "Hey," he said, stepping forward fast. "Back off." The guy looked up, surprised. "Mind your business," I said, "back off." Landon's voice was steel now. He didn't raise it, but it hit hard. He wasn't tall for intimidation, but he didn't need to be. His black suit was cut sharp, his eyes cold, and his presence the kind that made boardrooms fall silent did the rest. The guy muttered something under his breath and let go of the woman's wrist. "You're lucky," he hissed, backing off. "I was just talking to her." Landon stepped between them. "You touch her again, and I swear to God, it won't be just talking." The man turned and walked off quickly, disappearing around the corner. The woman let out a breath not shaky, not weak, just exhausted. "You okay?" Landon asked. She hesitated, then looked up at him. Her eyes were a sharp, bright hazel, strong. "Yeah, thanks. I didn't expect help from someone in a suit." He cracked a smile. "Most guys in suits wouldn't have stopped something like that." "I'm Landon," he said, reaching out to shake her hand. She looked at it, then at him. Ava, he repeated. "Nice to meet you, even if the circumstances suck." She looked down at her wrist, red where the guy had grabbed her. "I was just trying to drop off my resume. He followed me out of the restaurant, wouldn't take no for an answer." Landon's eyes narrowed. "What restaurant?" "Riva, on Fifth. Hostess job. He said he was the manager, but I don't think he actually worked there." He pulled out his phone, scrolled, and tapped something. "He doesn't. I know the owner. His name's Marcus. I'll make sure he knows who's hanging around outside his place." "And that guy won't get anywhere near there again." Ava raised an eyebrow. "You just know a restaurant owner like that?" Landon shrugged. "Let's just say I eat out a lot." She glanced at his suit again, skepticism in her eyes. "So what's your deal, Landon?" "You some kind of undercover vigilante CEO," he laughed. "Something like that." She gave him a look. "Wait, are you actually a CEO?" "Yeah, seriously, she blinked. "Okay, well, I guess thank you for saving me, Mr. CEO, he smiled. "It was nothing." Ava looked down at her resume, now crumpled in her hand. "Great, that was my last copy. I know a place 2 blocks over that." Prince resumes. "I'll walk you." She hesitated just for a second, then nodded. "All right." They walked side by side. She didn't talk much, but when she did, her words were sharp, honest. She was smart, Landon could tell, witty. And not the type to be impressed by wealth or charm. She was real. And strangely, that was magnetic. When they reached the print shop, she turned to him. "Thanks again." "For everything? You sure you don't want me to wait?" "No offense, but I've got it from here. I don't usually get saved by guys in suits." He grinned. "Well, if you ever need saving again." She rolled her eyes, playful this time. "I'll scream louder," he laughed, and she disappeared inside. Landon stood there another second, not sure why he felt unsettled. He hadn't even asked for her number. She hadn't offered it. And yet, something about her stuck with him as he walked off. He didn't know it yet, but that girl he saw in an alley, the one with fire in her voice and hazel eyes that didn't flinch, was about to flip his entire world upside down. 2 days later, he saw her again. He was at a meeting with his board at the Graves Tower, glass walls stretching into the skyline, discussing expansion in Milan when his assistant, Cara, knocked lightly on the door. "Mr. Graves, sorry to interrupt, but the new temp from HR's here for processing." They sent her up for approval. "I don't need to meet the temp, it's her," she said under her breath. "The girl from the alley." Landon stood immediately. "I'll be 10 minutes. He stepped out of the meeting room and saw her standing near reception, arms crossed, clearly tense. "Ava," he said, walking toward her. She turned and her eyes widened. "Oh, hell no," he laughed. "What are the odds? You work here." "I own the building." Her mouth fell open. "What?" I told you I was a CEO. I thought you were joking. He tried not to stare, but she looked different. Less guarded. Her hair was pulled up, her blouse neat but clearly secondhand, and still she looked incredible. "You're the temp?" he asked. She crossed her arms. "Yeah, apparently HR at Graves Industries uses the same agency I signed up with yesterday. Didn't expect to run into the guy who saved me in a back alley." He scratched the back of his neck. "Not exactly how I imagined seeing you again either." She narrowed her eyes. "You're not gonna pull some conflict of interest thing and get me kicked out, are you?" "No. But I do have one condition if you're gonna work here." "What?" "You have to let me take you to lunch," she blinked. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious." Her eyes searched his. "Why?" "Because I haven't stopped thinking about you since the alley. And I don't usually think about anyone." She was quiet for a second. "You always this direct?" "Only when I mean it." Ava hesitated. Then finally, slowly, she said, "Fine, one lunch," he smiled. "Tomorrow. My driver will pick you up at noon." She rolled her eyes again, this time with just a trace of a smile. "You don't take no for an answer, do you?" "Not when it comes to you." As he walked back to his boardroom, Landon knew one thing for sure: he didn't save her in that alley. She was about to save him. He just didn't see it yet. Ava stepped into the sleek black SUV waiting outside Graves' tower, the interior cooler than the early summer heat clinging to her skin. The driver greeted her with a polite nod and pulled away from the curb without a word. She kept her hands folded in her lap, trying not to fidget, her knee bouncing once before she caught it and forced it still. She hadn't expected him to follow through. Most men in his position offered things they never delivered, but not Landon. Not only had he remembered, he'd sent a driver. The SUV curved down a narrow street in Tribeca, away from the high-gloss business district. When it stopped in front of a quiet gray brick building with tall black windows and no visible signage, the driver stepped out and opened her door. Ava's heels clicked up the stone steps. She pushed the door open and paused. Inside, the space was warm, flooded with soft light from glass skylights above. The tables were dark oak, spaced wide and lined with low-backed leather chairs. A massive tree trunk rose through the center of the room, branches stretching toward the ceiling like sculpture. Landon was already seated at a corner table, a single menu resting in front of him, untouched. He stood when he saw her, not out of politeness but instinct. His tie was gone, sleeves rolled to his forearms, and he looked less like a CEO and more like a man who didn't care who was watching. "You found it," he said. "You didn't exactly leave me a choice. I could have sent a map. You sent a driver instead." He waited until she sat before settling back into his chair. "I figured you'd appreciate the shortcut." A server appeared without being called, dropping off 2 chilled glasses of water and disappearing again. Ava glanced around. This place doesn't even have a sign. It doesn't need one. Of course it doesn't. He leaned forward, fingers laced. "You're not easy to impress. I was hoping you knew that already." "I do. It's why I brought you here." Her brow lifted. "To a place that smells like fresh rosemary and has trees growing through the floor, to somewhere that doesn't pretend." Ava let out a soft laugh, more breath than sound. "So what, this is your version of casual?" "No, this is my version of real." She studied him for a second, then glanced down at the menu. "You don't have to be careful," he said. "Order whatever you want. Just because I'm not impressed doesn't mean I'm not hungry." Landon watched her pick through the options, the edge in her voice replaced by something quieter, not softer but thoughtful. She didn't act like someone who was used to being taken care of. She acted like someone who didn't have time to wait around for anyone else to do it. Once they ordered her, the duck confit pasta him, the roasted swordfish, the silence stretched, but not uncomfortably. She was the first to break it. "So what exactly do you do at Graves Industries?" "I build. Buy, fix, sometimes destroy when I have to. That's vague." "I run acquisitions, mostly tech, sometimes real estate." "Let me guess your calendar is booked out for the next 5 months and you sleep less than 4 hours a night, closer to 5. "And I cleared my calendar today. For lunch, for you." She blinked, caught off guard. I wanted to know why you were on your way to a hostess job when you're clearly overqualified, he said. Because rent doesn't care what I'm qualified for. You didn't answer the question. I graduated top of my class with a degree in media strategy, interned at 3 agencies, then watched them lay off half their staff right after I finished. My last interview was for a job that went to the CEO's nephew who couldn't explain what a conversion metric was. He didn't interrupt. So yeah, I took the hostess job, or tried to. It's not glamorous, but it pays. Or it would have if some creep hadn't ruined the interview. Do you want something better? Ava's eyes narrowed. Don't offer me a job just because you feel bad. I don't feel bad, I see value. I'm not interested in being anyone's project. I'm offering you options. That's all. The food arrived before she could answer. The server placed her plate gently in front of her, the aroma rising with steam. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the tension softening as the meal worked its quiet magic. Then Ava set down her fork. When I was 14, my mom got sick, she said suddenly. I took over every bill, every doctor's appointment. I figured out how to get food stamps and keep the lights on. She passed 2 years later. Since then, it's just been me. Landon didn't say anything. She didn't need sympathy. She was giving him facts. I don't tell you that for pity. I tell you that so you understand I don't trust people who offer help without strings. Then let me be clear, he said. There are no strings. You want a job that fits your skill set. I'll connect you to someone who doesn't care who your parents were or where your resume came from. You want to figure it out your own way, I'll step back. Why would you even care? Because for once I met someone who doesn't pretend. Ava looked down, then back up. Fine, I'll think about it. But don't expect me to owe you anything. I wouldn't dare. She stood before he could offer dessert, pulling her bag over her shoulder. You don't want to stay? I have somewhere to be. Where? An apartment with no air conditioning and a neighbor who practices trombone at full volume. He stood too, reaching into his jacket. She held up a hand. If you pull out a check, I'm walking out. Instead, he handed her a small ivory card, no logo, just a name and a number. She slipped it into her bag without looking. I'm not someone you can fix, Landon. Good, I don't want to fix you, I want to know you. She didn't answer. But as she walked away, he watched something shift in her shoulders, less guarded, more curious. And for the first time in years, Landon Graves wasn't thinking about market shares or merger clauses. He was thinking about a woman who didn't flinch when power stared her down, and wondering what the hell he was supposed to do with a heart that had started racing again. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse. Ava stepped out hesitantly, taking in the expansive room with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. The space was soaked in golden late afternoon light, the kind that made everything look a little softer, a little less cruel. She'd never stood in a place so high up that the streets below looked like veins of light instead of concrete. She turned slowly, absorbing the subtle opulence. A grand piano in one corner, unplayed but polished to a mirror finish, paintings that looked original, not copied, a single long dining table that could seat 10 but had only one chair pulled out. Nothing unnecessary. Everything deliberate. You live here? She asked, turning as Landon stepped in behind her. I sleep here. I don't live anywhere, really. Ava raised an eyebrow. You invited me to a place you don't live in. I wanted quiet. And I wasn't going to take you to a restaurant with cameras in every corner. I didn't say yes to dinner. You didn't say no, she crossed her arms. I said I'd think about your offer. That doesn't mean we're friends. I'm not asking for friendship. Then what are you asking for? He walked past her, loosening the cuffs of his shirt. I'm asking you to stop pretending this doesn't feel different. Ava didn't respond, not immediately. She walked to the window instead, pressed her fingertips lightly against the glass. I'm not used to men with skyscraper views talking about feelings. I'm not used to caring what anyone thinks of mine. She turned to face him. Then why now? Landon paused, then moved to a cabinet near the kitchen. He opened it, pulled out 2 glasses and a bottle of something deep amber. I'm not sure, he said. But I've been in boardrooms with men twice my age and walked away with everything they thought they'd keep. I've negotiated billion-dollar contracts without blinking. But you, he poured the whiskey, held one out to her. She didn't take it. You walk into a room like you don't owe it anything, he continued. And suddenly I feel like everything I've built isn't enough. Ava's eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but calculation. You don't know me, you know a version of me you've built in your head. I know you're not impressed by money or power. You didn't flinch when I told you who I was. You didn't try to impress me. That doesn't make me different, that makes me tired. Landon set the glass down untouched. Then tell me what you want. I want to stop checking price tags in my head every time I breathe. I want to work somewhere with purpose, not just a paycheck. I want to be seen without being judged by what I don't have. You want independence. I want a life that's mine, he nodded. Then let me help you build it. That's not how independence works. I'm not offering control, I'm offering resources. She studied him. You always this generous with your resources? No, but I've never met anyone who made me want to give them away. Ava's voice dropped. You're crossing lines, am I? You're my boss. Not exactly, you're a temp. She tilted her head. And you're a man used to getting what you want. I'm not used to being told no. She took a breath and stepped closer, not close enough to touch, but close enough to challenge. Then here's your first. Landon didn't move. I'm not looking for a game. I'm not playing one. Their eyes locked, the city glowing behind them like a wall of fire. Ava's pulse thumped in her throat, but her voice stayed steady. You want to help me? Fine, then don't flirt, don't offer me penthouses. Don't treat me like a fantasy. What if I want more than that? Then prove it. Give me a reason to believe you're not just bored. Landon exhaled slowly, the weight behind it heavier than she expected. I'm not bored, Ava. Then do something you're not used to. Wait. He didn't speak. He just nodded once. And in that moment, something shifted between them, not softer, not easier, but clearer. Ava turned and walked to the elevator, her heels silent against the polished floor. She didn't look back. Landon stood still, the untouched glass of whiskey casting long shadows across the marble. For the first time in years, he didn't feel in control. He felt challenged. And somehow that made him want her more, but not like before, not to conquer, not to own, to deserve. And for a man who had always gotten what he wanted simply by asking, wanting something he had to earn was the most dangerous feeling of all. Landon stood in front of the wide glass window of his office, watching the lights across the Hudson flicker on one by one. The skyline was dissolving into night, but his mind was nowhere near business. He hadn't touched the report his assistant left on his desk. Numbers felt irrelevant now. So did meetings, projections, and stock movement she hadn't called. Not in 3 days. Not since she walked out of his penthouse with that fire in her voice and a boundary in her eyes. He slid his hand into his pocket and pulled out the card he'd given her. The one with his direct number. She hadn't used it. Behind him, the door creaked open. I told them no interruptions, he said without turning. I told them I didn't care. He turned sharply. Ava stood in the doorway, damp curls clinging to her shoulders, her coat soaked through, her eyes locked on his, unreadable. You walked here in the rain, he asked. She stepped inside, not answering. I wasn't sure if you'd come back, he added. I wasn't sure either. He moved toward her slowly, uncertain whether to close the distance. I got an offer, she said, from a media firm in Brooklyn. One of the contacts you passed my resume to reached out. That's good. It is. They want me to start next week. Then you should. I gave them my yes. You didn't need my permission. She took a breath, her voice quieter now. That's not why I came, Landon waited. I needed to say this in person, she said. I told you to wait, and you did. You didn't call, you didn't chase. That meant more than anything you could have bought me. I meant what I said, no pressure, no expectations. I know. And that's why I'm here. Her eyes softened just enough for him to see past the steel. I haven't trusted anyone in a long time, she continued, but you didn't try to fix me. You didn't demand anything. You just listened. You saw me. I still do. She stepped closer. You didn't save me in that alley, you just stood next to me when I needed someone too. Landon reached for her hand slowly, as if asking permission without words. She let him take it. I don't want anything complicated, she said. Neither do I. I don't want to lose who I am, you couldn't even if you tried. And I don't want to be something you collect. Landon's voice dropped. You're not something, you're someone I didn't see coming. Ava looked down at their joined hands, then back up at him. I'm terrified, she admitted. So am I. But I want to try. He closed the space between them completely, lifting her hand to his chest so she could feel how fast his heart was beating. I've built 100 things that didn't matter, he said. But if I get to build something with you, something real, I'll tear the rest down without hesitation. Ava's lips parted, not in surprise, but in something deeper, something like relief. She leaned up just slightly, and he met her halfway, his mouth pressing to hers in a kiss that wasn't rushed or tentative. It was grounded, steady, a promise wrapped in silence. When they finally pulled apart, her forehead rested lightly against his. I didn't bring an umbrella, she said. I'll walk you out. I'm not leaving. The words landed between them like an anchor. You're not, he asked, voice barely above a whisper. She shook her head. Not tonight. He reached behind her and shut the office door with one hand, still holding hers with the other. Later, much later, when the rain had stopped and the city had quieted, Ava lay with her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of something she never thought she'd find again, peace. Landon brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. I never believed in fate, neither did I. But if I hadn't cut through that alley, she smiled against his skin. Then I would have found another way to make you notice me, he laughed, the sound low and warm. You think I could have missed you? You almost did. He pulled her closer, lips brushing her temple. Not a chance. And just like that, the man who had spent his life building empires finally understood what it meant to build something that couldn't be bought, negotiated, or acquired. Something real, something his. Ava stood in front of the long mirror, her reflection framed by soft golden light and the hum of city life below. She smoothed the fabric of the pale blue gown that fit her like a second skin. It wasn't borrowed or gifted, it was hers. Paid for with her first real paycheck from the media firm she'd started at 6 weeks ago. The work was fast-paced, demanding, and exactly the kind of challenge she'd craved. She hadn't told Landon she was coming straight from a shoot. She wanted to surprise him. She reached for the small velvet box she'd hidden in her purse. Inside was a sleek silver pen with his initials engraved on it. She'd found it in a vintage shop tucked between 2 art galleries in Soho. It was simple, elegant, earned, like the way they'd chosen each other. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse, and she stepped out into the low flicker of candlelight and the soft strains of a string quartet echoing from the terrace. Landon, she called out. The reply came from outside. Out here. She followed the music to the terrace, where the city stretched out beneath a sky painted in deep violet and copper. A long table was set for 2, the centerpiece a cascade of white tulips and silver eucalyptus. He stood at the far end, his back to her, one hand resting lightly on the railing. When he turned, her breath caught. He was dressed in a midnight black tux, no tie, collar open. But it wasn't the clothes that made her pause. It was the look in his eyes, quiet, certain, and completely unguarded. I thought we agreed no theatrics, she said, stepping closer, smiling. I don't remember agreeing to anything, he replied. Besides, this isn't a performance, it's a promise. She tilted her head. Promise of what? Of everything I never thought I'd have. Landon reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. He handed it to her. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a deed. Her name was listed as the primary owner of a small townhouse in Brooklyn Heights. A fixer-upper but structurally sound and within walking distance of her new office. Her throat tightened. You bought me a house. No, I bought us a project. You told me you wanted something that was yours. So I found something we could build together. I thought you weren't trying to fix me. I'm not. I'm building with you. Ava stepped forward and laid her hand against his chest, her voice soft. You know this scares me, right? I know. But I also know you're not someone who lets fear stop her. She reached into her purse and handed him the box. He opened it, and when he saw the pen, he let out a quiet breath. I know it's small, she said. It's perfect. She traced the edge of his lapel. I never thought I'd find someone who made me feel like I could be safe and still be strong. He leaned down, his forehead brushing hers. I never thought I'd want anything more than power until you. They didn't kiss then. Not yet. Instead, he guided her to the table, poured her a glass of champagne, and waited until the music faded into the low hum of the city. They ate slowly, laughing over nothing, stealing glances, letting the silence between them be warm instead of heavy. After dinner, Landon stood and held out his hand. "Dance with me," he said. "There's no music. There's always music, you just have to listen." She rose, slipping her hand into his. He pulled her close and they began to sway, the rhythm guided by the city's breath and their own heartbeats. She rested her head against his shoulder and let herself fall into the quiet peace that came with being seen, chosen, and wanted without condition. When he finally kissed her, it wasn't rushed. It was layered with all the things they hadn't needed to say out loud. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the sheets, and Ava stretched, blinking into the brightness. Landon was already awake, sitting at the edge of the bed, reading something on his phone. He looked over his shoulder and smiled, not the charming, polished smile he wore in meetings, but the one he saved for her alone. "Morning," she said. "I was about to bring you coffee." She sat up, tugging the sheets around her. "I still can't believe you found that townhouse." "I didn't find it. I spent 3 weeks walking the neighborhood until I saw a for sale sign that felt right." "You walked Brooklyn, every block," she laughed, the sound light. "You really are full of surprises." He turned to face her completely. "There's one more." She narrowed her eyes. "You're making me nervous. I have a meeting in London next week. 3 days, come with me." She blinked. "You want me to fly to another country with you? I want you to wake up next to me in a different time zone." She pulled the sheets tighter around her, pretending to consider. "Business class, private jet. I'll pack tonight." They both laughed, and he leaned forward to kiss her again. Later, when they walked out of the penthouse, hand in hand, Ava didn't feel like she was stepping into someone else's world anymore. She was stepping into her own, a life she had fought for, earned, and now shared with someone who had chosen her not in spite of her scars, but because of them. They reached the lobby, and the doorman greeted them with a nod. "Where to today, Mr. Graves?" Landon looked at Ava. "Wherever she wants." And for the first time in a long time, Ava knew exactly where she was going: home, with him, forever.